Good evening. Well, here we have our last evening of this Melbourne class. And while it's probably too early to know anything about it, I can surely hope that it will meet with the same success as it goes out into the world as our last Melbourne class. No, it wasn't. It's our first Melbourne class on healing. For that one has been one of our outstanding classes ever since its beginning, and it is still going around the world. The Bible tells us that not a sparrow falls without his knowing about it, but the sparrows do fall. Can you tell us how this should be? And the next question, will you please explain how it is that storms are man-made or man-caused? I give you both of these questions together because the answer is the same. Without a cause, there can be no effect. If the air in this room is still, quiet, as it is now, it will have to remain this way forever and forever and forever unless something stirs it up. It can't stir itself up. Of its own self, it will remain exactly as it is. Therefore, something must stir it. Now, follow this around the world, and you find out then that even though they have found places that are the origin of storms, this could not be if something didn't start the storm. In other words, as the weather would be before the storm, so it would continue to be unless something happened. Now, what is it that we have learned out of 5,000 years of history? It is exactly this, that every event that takes place in time and space has its origin in one of two activities. It is either the manifestation of God, Spirit, perfection, harmony, or it is a product of the belief in two powers. And that, of course, is mental, and that is human, even though universal. In other words, as a human being, you are not under the law of God, neither indeed can be. You must understand this, or else you have no possible hope of progressing on the spiritual path until you come to the realization that the human race is a man cut off from the tree, a branch cut off from the tree that withereth. You cannot get back home because you will not know the process. The Master says, if you abide in the Word, let the Word abide in you, you will bear fruit richly. If you do not abide in this Word, if you do not let this Word abide in you, if you do not become one with the vine, with the source, you are as a branch of a tree that is cut off and withereth. But if you do abide in the vine, in the Word, if you do live and move and have your being in God, and let God live in you, you will bear fruit richly. Now then, those who are abiding in the Word, those who are living consciously in God, their life experience is from the source, God, Spirit. Their life is spiritual. Their harmony, their wholeness, their completeness, their perfection, all has its source in the spiritual realm, and they are governed by spiritual law, spiritual substance, spiritual being. But the human race, which you know right well, is full of sin and disease and ultimately death, wars, man's inhumanity to man. You can hardly call this the offspring of God that is under God's government. The source of the discords and inharmony of man whose breath is in his nostril is this universal belief in two powers which we term the carnal mind or mortal mind. There is no such thing as a carnal mind, and there is no such thing as a mortal mind. These are merely names given to a universal belief in two powers. Now, as a human being, that is what governs us. And therefore, we awaken in the morning, but we have absolutely no assurance that we're going to go to sleep that night. We awake healthy in the morning and are not certain that we'll be healthy at night or even alive. We go out about our innocent business and are not sure whether we'll get home. Why? There is this universal belief of two powers. And of course, one of these powers can pick us up for good and in the next instance throw us down for evil. And both of those things are happening to us all through our human span. Now, there's only one way to change that, and that is when you recognize that the reason there are evils in your experience, uncertainties, is that you are not under the law of God, neither indeed can be. Then you can turn around and return to the Father's house. In other words, consciously awaken in the morning and begin your day's meditations with the realization that this is God's day, God's government, and so forth. And then, as it is outlined in the Message of the Infinite Way, go through your entire day and your entire night consciously abiding in God. Then you will find why the 91st Psalm says, "He that dwelleth in the secret place of the Most High, none of these evils will come nigh his dwelling place." But none of these things will come nigh his dwelling place is directed only at he that dwelleth, lives in the secret place of the Most High. He that consciously abides under the shadow of the Almighty, he who is constantly recognizing spiritual source, spiritual government, spiritual power, spiritual presence, spiritual grace, to him none of the evils of this world will come nigh his dwelling place. Therefore, it is the activity of the carnal mind, or the activity of this universal belief in two powers, which gives us every discord, whether it's a personal one that affects our bodies or an impersonal one that affects our weather or epidemics. You see, an epidemic couldn't be caused if something didn't cause it. Well, you say, yes, the spread of germs, but there has to be germs. Then where did the germs come from? Because there must have been a time and place when they weren't. And you will find that you can trace every phenomena of human existence to the activity of the carnal mind, or the belief, the universal belief, in two powers. Now, there's only one way in which you can prove this, and that is if you grasp this as a principle and then begin to apply it to the discords of the human experience that touch your life, and begin to see them dissolve because of this, then you will know that it is a fact, that it is only because of a universal belief in two powers, individually and collectively accepted, that we are faced with any of the material or mental discords of life, and that the overcoming of these is the recognition of the non-power of that which is not ordained of God. And that must be the belief in two powers, is not ordained of God, because it is that which threw us out of Eden. So it is then that this work that we are doing in the infinite way has its basis in this revelation which I received as to the nature and origin of evil and its mode of operation. And it all has to do with the fact that we are dealing with a universal mesmerism, a universal hypnotism, which is really the belief in two powers accepted in consciousness. And the only way to overcome it is individually and eventually collectively abiding in this. Now, where one person knows this truth, they can begin to apply it in their experience and in the experience of any who come to them. Where two or more have it, it is much more powerful. And if there are 10 righteous men, righteous, of course, beyond the righteousness of the scribes and the Pharisees, it will be that much more potent in world affairs. Which brings me to a teaching of the Masters which I have never found taught in any of the teachings about which I have read. The Master stresses secrecy. He makes it really a major part of his teaching. I can understand why it isn't generally taught, because, as I've said, the secret of the operation of mind has been lost, and therefore no one can figure out why secrecy is of such a value. If they knew the operation of mind, they will definitely know and quickly know why it is that secrecy is one of the greatest powers, positive powers, ever turned loose in the world. Now, the Master begins this teaching on the subject of alms, benevolences. You are not to do your alms in public where man can see you, because if you do, you will gain the praise of your fellow man for your charities, but you will forfeit God's grace. You can choose which you'd rather have: the approbation of your fellow man, having him see your name in the paper with a contribution and saying how charitable you are, or doing your charity, not letting it be known, and then receiving God's reward. If you tried both ways, you'd find out quickly which one you'd prefer, and you would know that there is a power in secrecy. Now, what is this power? Well, let's come to that in another minute. He stresses secrecy in praying. Now, of course, the entire world is violating that. The whole church is built on the structure of violating that very teaching. But it can't throw the teaching out of the New Testament. The words of the Master will stay there forever, regardless of what anyone tries to do about it. Do not pray where you can be seen of men, because you will receive the approval of your fellow man. And you see that on every side, especially in small communities. Those who don't attend church regularly get pretty well talked about. Those who do attend regularly are known as good Christians. But the Master says that by gaining the approbation of your fellow man, you lose the grace of God. And you do. You do. That's why, one of the reasons why prayers rarely are answered. We're violating the terms of prayer. Now let us see just why this is. What is the source of answered prayer? If you were to pray right now and expect an answer, from what direction would you expect an answer? From the other students sitting in this room? Or from God? Well, the answer is very clear, isn't it? That you're not expecting an answer to your prayer from any of us sitting in this room. And while we might think you're a very nice person and a good Christian if we saw you at prayer, that does not in any wise answer your prayer. Where is your prayer to be answered from? From God. Where is God? In the midst of you. Where were you when you were praying? Out here with us. And your prayer just never reached the throne of God. It just reached as high as the approbation of those sitting around you watching you pray. And your mind wasn't on God when you were praying. Because in order for your mind to be on God, you have got to be far away from the influence of any crowd of people or mass of people or herd of people or gathering of people. If you want your mind stayed on God, you have got to be somewhere where you can be in the inner sanctuary of your own being, where you can't be interrupted by a telephone and you can't be interrupted by your neighbors, and you can't be interrupted by the fidgeting around you, and you can't be interrupted by the odors from anybody else. You, if you want to commune with God, you have got to be so alone that you couldn't even hear a cry for help if it came to you. To be alone with God, to be in communion with God, means to shut out this entire world. You can't reach God with a few coppers and a telephone. You can't reach God by just turning around saying, "Oh, God, come on." God is closer to you than breathing and nearer than hands and feet, but God is hid within you under 1,000 generations of people who have been worshiping false gods. And if you hope to break through the veil of illusion that has been built around you, superstition, ignorance of God, false worship, worship of false gods, You have got to get off somewhere, under the stars or under the trees or in your room, somewhere where you can be so alone that you can't even hear the cooing of the birds. Then, when you enter your inner sanctuary and close the door, shut off your senses, shut out the outside world, get inside of yourself in secret, then the Father that seeth in secret rewardeth thee openly. And this is one of the deepest secrets of secrecy, this understanding of prayer and this understanding of almsgiving. Almsgiving, why is it done? Why does one give alms to begin with? Well, let us put the noblest construction on it. We want to help somebody. Now, that's about the noblest reason there is, and let us say that that's what always animates us, the desire to help somebody. Now, tell me, why is it anybody's business but yours and God's that you want to help somebody or that you are helping somebody? What is there about that that concerns anyone but you and your Father, who gave you the means with which to help somebody else? Because you didn't bring it with you into this world. It was given to you. Anything you have is an act of grace. And it's your privilege to share it to any extent you would like. But tell me, is it anybody else's business but yours? Isn't it something between you and your heart if you wish to help somebody else? Are you even being loving to the one you want to help if you let others know about it and know that they need the help and know that you have to give them the help? There's nothing noble in giving and letting it be known. There is something debasing about it, because it has every semblance of wanting to be thanked, wanting to be approved of, wanting to be thought well of by somebody else instead of only by God. Once you learn the nature of secrecy, you will understand this. It really doesn't make any difference if the whole world is against us, if God is for us. It really doesn't make any difference what anybody's opinion of us is, if only we deserve the good opinion of the Father within that seeth in secret. There's no need for us to wear a sanctimonious face to make people think we're virtuous or righteous. It isn't their business. It is only the business of God, and it is our business to be so at one with God that we live so in accord with what we understand to be the laws of God that we wouldn't violate it. Well, what is that anybody else's business? That's only my business, and that is only my relationship with God, and therefore we were taught not to do as the Hebrews do, wear sackcloth and ashes and pray up against the wall to be seen of men and look sanctimonious. We were told not to do any of those things, but to just wear our business clothes and look bright and cheerful and normal, and not wear our heart on our sleeves. To let no man know what we're doing, but keep ourselves pure with God and keep our relationship with God a secret. Now, of course, everyone has learned this, that the more a person talks, the more they are leaking their good. It's just leaking away from them. It is just very much as if you invented something, and then before you got your patent you went around telling everybody about it. By the time you got to the patent office, you were too late. Or, as a lady did in New York, after waiting for months for the sales to come so that she could get a heavy winter coat with fur trimming at a price that she could afford, which would be about half the price that they were selling for. After patiently waiting until eventually it happened, Macy's came out with a half-price ad on beautiful heavy coats with fur collars. And immediately she ran to the phone and told all of her friends and relatives about it, then went down to Macy's and found they were sold out. And that is one of the evils of talking. That is one of the evils of telling everything we know, more especially casting our pearls before swine for it to be trampled on. Now, a person on the spiritual path talks very little about spiritual matters except when teaching or when imparting truth. Otherwise, you'll find your truth teacher, as a rule, is the stingiest person in the world with truth. You can hardly draw a word out of them unless it is in the course of instruction, impartation, healing. And that is the reason that truth, when it's going around and round and round inside in our consciousness, is known of the Father, and whatever is known in secret is shouted from the housetops. Whatever is known in secret. And you see, supposing we have a need. As a rule, the first thing we do is to go around telling as many people as possible, hoping perhaps that one of them will meet our need, or tell somebody else about it who in turn will meet our need. Whereas, if we had a need and kept it locked up secretly within ourselves, it wouldn't be long until the fulfillment would come. Because there is that within us which seeth in secret and rewardeth openly. Always remember this. He knoweth your need. Now, you don't have to go around telling it to anybody. As a matter of fact, who is better able to give it to us than God? And so if we keep it locked up between ourselves and God, he that seeth in secret will reward us openly. So, you see then that when we begin to live as if the kingdom of God were within us, and that all of our tabernacling was to be within us, all of our communing with God was to be in us, and we begin to ignore man whose breath is in his nostril. For wherein is he to be accounted of? Do not put your faith in princes. Cease ye from man whose breath is in his nostril. Wherein is he to be accounted of? And live your inner life in secret contemplation with the Father. Then you will find that you have obeyed the 15th chapter of John. You are now living at one with the vine, the Christ, which is within you. And you then begin drawing your good from the withinness. But not until you have shut off the outside avenues and outside channels and learned to live your life wholly in an inner communion with God. Certainly we associate with each other on the outer plane. Certainly we have certain avenues of intercourse. We have loads of joys and loads of pleasures and loads of friendships and loads of companionship, but the things of God are held sacred within our own selves. Even man and wife must keep their own unfoldment secret and sacred within themselves. Oh, in the marriage life, there are some points at which wives and husbands if they are close enough together on the path, can share with each other just as students and teachers can. But there are very few others that can ever be admitted to that degree of intimacy that we share our spiritual secrets. These must be our own, and then the Father that seeth in secret rewardeth thee openly. Now, I'm going to carry this a step further, because since we've been on the subject of secrecy, I'm going to tell you a secret and caution you to keep it secret. Because all you can do in speaking about it is waste it, let it trickle out from you, let it be trampled on until you yourself have lost it. What I'm going to tell you, you will never be able to demonstrate unless you keep it locked up so secretly and sacredly within yourself that you just wouldn't share it with anyone regardless of their relationship with you. If the time comes when someone comes to you in the same sacredness that you have come here to meet, then you can share it with them in the course of instruction. Why do we have closed classes? Well, you see, anyone can come to a lecture out of curiosity. Anyone can come to a lecture looking for loaves and fishes. Anyone can come to a lecture because we invite them. We're glad for them to come to hear whether this particular spiritual path means anything to them. You can't impart the deep things of God to them. They're not even through the milk stage, much more the meat. But remember that when a student has been admitted to one of my closed classes, it means, first of all, we try to ascertain that they have read at least 3, 4, 5 of my books and know them, have attended tape groups, have had some measure of spiritual healing through our work. In other words, that before they come into my closed class, they are already convinced that this message is for them. They are already at that point where they are willing to give me time, effort, devotion, support. If they haven't arrived at that state, I can't have them in closed class, because they're not here to give, they're here to get. And those who are here to get will go away disappointed. No one should ever go into a church to get anything. No one should ever go into a class to get anything. By the time you come to a closed class, you should know from my writings that you are already infinite and that you are coming here to give. You're giving of yourself. You're giving of your time. You're giving of your devotion. You're giving of the sacredness of your life. You're sharing of your material supply. You are contributing to an activity. Why? Only so that it may spread and others have it. But why should you be interested in their having it if you haven't already become convinced that it's worthwhile having? Now then, if you are in my closed class, if you have read several books and heard some tapes, if you have given some time and attention to healing or being healed, if you have given me some evidence, or those who conduct the work for me, if you have given some evidence that you're really giving devotion, giving yourself to the seeking of God, then you belong here. But if you belong here, then I have no secrets from you. Everything that has been imparted to me from the Father belongs to you. And I would have no more right to withhold any revelation from you, then I would expect you to withhold time, effort, or devotion to the search for God. Now, since we are here in that relationship, and I can give you the meat of the Word, I must also give it to you in the expectation that you are spiritually mature, that you can understand that there are some things that cannot be given to the immature, that there must be milk for babes before there is meat for the adult. And so it is that I can give you this. And this is the reason for answered prayer. This is the reason why the grace of God touches us in our benevolences when we keep them secret. There is but one selfhood. There is but one God, meaning there is but one life. And therefore, my life is your life. The same life that's coursing in my veins is coursing in yours. The same intelligence that manifests in me is manifesting in you. The same soul that animates my being is animating your being. There is only one I. I am that I. And that I is God. And that God constitutes my being. It is my life. But if it is, it's your life, because there's only one life. That God is my mind. But if that is true, that God is your mind, because there can only be one mind. God is my soul, and if that's true, God is your soul. Then we have the same soul. So we have the same soul, we have the same life, we have the same spirit, we have the same being. And therefore, now listen to this well, inasmuch as ye have done it unto the least of these, ye have done it unto that me, that Christ, that God, that I. Whatever you do to another, you are doing unto God your divine selfhood. Therefore, the good you do to another, you are doing to yourself. The harm you do to another, you are doing to yourself. Because there is only one self. And you can't hurt any self without hurting yourself. And you cannot benefit any self without benefiting yourself. Because there is only one self, and that is the self of all of us. In other words, when we mail out a check to any philanthropy, any benevolence, any charity, we're mailing it to our own bank account. It may take a week or two to get back into our bank book, but it'll get there because we've mailed it unto ourselves. If we take out money from the pocketbook and put it into somebody else's pocketbook, it won't be but a short time. It'll be back in our pocketbook with interest. Why? Because there is only one pocketbook. Know ye not that your body is the temple of God? Well, then your body must be my body, because God only has one body. An injustice and an injury that we do to another, we do to ourselves. Now, this was known to the Master, Christ Jesus. And this was one of the bases of his teaching. It was removed from the world 300 years A.D. It has been absent from the world ever since, except in the case of mystics who have had it revealed to them, and they in turn have revealed it to their followers. If you could keep a teaching of this kind from being organized, you could keep this teaching going forever, and there would be no wars on earth. Once it's organized, we get to depending on that membership instead of on truth. Or we get depending on the minister on the platform, or whoever their revelator or Messiah or Savior happens to be. And so there are some waiting for Buddha to give them good, and some waiting for Jesus to give them good, some waiting for Christ to give them good, and some waiting for God to give them good, and nobody can give them good but themselves. The good that you do, the bread that you cast on the water, this comes back to you. It's yours. It was earmarked for you from the moment you cast it on the waters. Inasmuch, never forget this quotation, inasmuch as you have done it unto the least, you've done it unto yourself. You've done it unto Christ. You've done it unto the Spirit of God in you. And inasmuch as you have violated the least self in all the world, you have violated yourself. No one is to blame for our problems but ourselves. We create our own karma. That is, the good we do today returns to us eventually as good. The evil we do today returns to us eventually as evil. We are creating our own future every moment that we live, because there is only one self, and whatever we're doing, we are doing unto ourselves. And so you can readily understand that if you are helping somebody with money, with a home, with clothing, and you violate that confidence and go and tell others about it or let it be known, you're hurting that individual. You're hurting their dignity. You're hurting their pride. You're hurting their privacy, all of which you wouldn't want done unto you. And the Master's teaching was, do unto others as you would have others do unto you. And there is none of us who may not at some particular time be in need of each other or each other's help. And if we truly be brethren, we will not hesitate to ask for that help. But think how we'd feel if we thought that it was going to be advertised abroad. And then you'd know that in such advertising, you're hurting. And in the end, who are you hurting? Yourself. And the reason is, there is but one self. Now, when you come to working out problems of human relationships, can be family, marital, parental, it can be business, human relationships in business or art or profession, public. You will find that if you will refer to the chapter Relationship of Oneness in the Art of Spiritual Healing, or if you will refer to the chapter Love Thy Neighbor in Practicing the Present, you will have all of these principles that have to do with relationship, and they're all based on the secret of I. I am you. And what I do unto you, I do unto me. And therefore, when we have problems of human relationships, we have got to work from the basis, I am you. And then you'll find out how quickly these problems will be solved. But in all things, remember that when you are holding sacredly and secretly within you I and my Father are one, that means I and my neighbor are one. I and my Father are one means also I and my neighbor are one, because we are all children of the same Father. We are all branches of the same tree. We are all united in the tree of life. We are one. Then, abiding in this within yourself, you will find that from the housetops it will be shouted that you are one with each other, that there is love in your relationship with each other, compassion, helpfulness, mutualness, cooperativeness, and you will never have to voice it. It is just like being honest or being moral. You don't have to go around telling anybody you're honest or moral, because Emerson tells us, what you are shrieks so loudly I cannot hear what you say. And therefore, if there is integrity in us, let's not tell each other about it. Let the other fellow find it out. If there is morality in us, let's not tell anyone about it. Let him find it out for himself. If there is charitableness in us, if there is forgiveness in us, let's not tell anyone about it. Let them find it out for themselves. By our very secrecy, in some way, God will make our character integrity known to the world. And we will never have to voice it. And we will have the benefit that accrues from holding within ourselves our secret good and our relationship with God. Yes, and that goes to a next step, too. Our outer experience is the externalization of our state of consciousness. Therefore, we don't have to talk about what's going on in our consciousness. The mere fact that it's there externalizes itself. In other words, if I am living morning, noon, and night in the realization I and my Father are one, I am ever with my Father, and all that the Father hath is mine. If I abide in that and keep that locked up in me, eventually you'll see that it's absolutely true that I and my Father are one, and that means I'm at one with everybody on the face of the globe, and I'm at one with my good. I won't have to talk about it. It will be evident out here in my expression of life. And I will never have to say that to anyone. And as a matter of fact, wouldn't it be foolish to say these things to people? Would they believe it? No, because they've been taught the value of advertising. If you don't advertise it, if you don't tell it to the world, how are they going to find out you've got it? Emerson told us just to make a better product, and the world would beat a pathway to our door even if we didn't advertise it, and it is so. What is locked up in us in the form of consciousness is very evident outwardly and openly. Why is it possible to heal another spiritually and yet still not be able to break the mesmerism of an old belief and so forth? Well, while I probably couldn't give you the full answer of that, I can give you one, and that is this: that if we're really on the spiritual path, our problem isn't just getting rid of a problem. Our goal actually is attaining God realization. And it is only in proportion as we gain it that the problems can disappear. Therefore, in the infinite way wisdoms, I have said, because it was given me, that as long as there is a trace of humanhood in our consciousness, we will externalize some form of human experience. And that is the answer as far as I know it. As long as we have a problem, there is still some phase of humanness which has not died, which has not been overcome. There is some facet of truth which has not yet been revealed to us. Because wherever there is light, the darkness vanishes. So if there is still some darkness in our experience, be assured there is some facet of light we have not yet gained. And so it is, our real function is not to worry about how long our particular problem lasts, because we should be willing to wrestle with the error all night until God is revealed to us. Because if our object on being on this path is merely to get rid of problems and to have a lot more human good, we won't attain it anyhow. There's no hope for it. Our success on this path is in proportion to our desire to attain God realization, and then watching how the things are added unto us and the discords dissolve and disappear from our experience. Paul talked about having a thorn in his side always. What is your opinion of the laying on of hands? Everything is a state of consciousness. And those who can heal that way will undoubtedly want to go on healing that way as long as it seems to them the right way to do it. And there can't be a wrong way. There can't be a wrong way of doing right. So that way is right for the state of consciousness that's doing it. Our way is right for our state of consciousness. The person who is still living with affirmations, it's right for them too, as long as that is their state of consciousness. The person who wouldn't feel safe going out on the street without a St. Anthony medal or a crucifix, that's right for them. That is the externalization of their state of consciousness, and there's no use of asking them to walk on the water until they're ready for it. There's no use of asking them to go our path, because our path may not be for them. If I thought that the Infinite Way path was for everybody, I would have memberships and I'd rope everybody into it to give them their good in spite of themselves. But I know better than that. I know there is no one path for everybody, and each one must find their own path. Each one must find their own state of consciousness. And that is why in teaching practitioner work, I tell our students that I will never tell them how to give a treatment, because a treatment must be an individual thing. I will tell them the principles on which treatment is based. Then they must evolve their own treatment. And there are some people who in the beginning of their work require 10 and 15 and 20 minutes for a treatment. Watch those same people 2 or 3 years later, and they'll give just as good, if not better, treatment in less than a minute. But each one must be allowed to come to that of themselves. When we pass on, do we meet our loved ones again, and shall we know them? Now, the answer to that is this, and I'm sure you want a truthful answer. Nothing is ever lost out of your consciousness that you want to keep there. A concrete illustration. How many of you, don't tell me, just answer yourselves, how many of you have friends or relatives that you haven't seen for 20 years and don't care if you never see them again? Well, you see, that's because they're no longer a part of your consciousness, and so you're not interested in them, even on this plane. And it's very certain that on the next plane you won't see them. Why? They're not in or of your consciousness. They mean nothing to you. On the other hand, try to think of someone who is thousands of miles away from you, whom you haven't seen for a year or 2 or 3 or 5, and then see how often they are out of your consciousness. See how often they're away from you, and see if they really ever leave you. And so you can be sure that just as they are in your consciousness here, even with thousands of miles and lots of time to separate you, they will still be in and of your consciousness on the next plane. Therefore, we tabernacle with those on this plane with whom we wish to tabernacle, and we drop from consciousness those in whom we have no interest, even if they're bound to us with blood ties. On the next plane, it is the same. You will never be disturbed by anybody being in your consciousness that you don't want there. On the other hand, no one can drop out of your consciousness that you want there. Your consciousness continues on this plane or on the next plane and on the 12 planes beyond, if there are that many. And always you have dominion over your consciousness. And you have dominion over everything in your consciousness. And therefore you have dominion as to who you want in your consciousness and who you want to drop. And so it is, you will never be deprived of anyone or of anything that is essential to your good. You may always remember our revised marriage ceremony. What God hath joined together, no man can put asunder. And therefore, if you are tied to anybody or anything by a link of God, whether it's parent or child or brother or sister or friend or aunt or uncle or 17th cousin, if they are bound to you by any spiritual tie, it is an eternal relationship. Those relationships that are not of God are fleeting. They come into our experience and out, like changing positions or changing cities to live in or changing houses to live in. They come in, they have their pleasant memories, and they're gone. But that which is given to us of God, no man can take from us. No situation can arise that would separate us. And all you need to do to remember that is, neither life nor death can separate me from the love of God. And whatever the love of God has in store for me, I will have here or hereafter. For God's love will never forsake me just because I cross a state line or a line of consciousness. It's been a beautiful week. Weather hasn't been so good, but fortunately everything else has been. And while I can't say it in words, there too, if there is any spiritual bond between us, in that degree I'm sure you will know how thankful I am for you, for this class, for your generosity, for your thoughtfulness, for everything. And you have even obeyed one of our strict rules. We have a rule that nobody can stay away from a class or a session of a class. We don't even permit them to die during our classwork. Thank you. Thank you.